Nancy Drew Mystery Stories Number 9, The Sign of the Twisted Candles by Carolyn Keene. Copyright 1932, Grosset and Dunlap. Chapter 1, Trapped by the Tempest. Oh, Nancy, I'm afraid to go any farther, and I'm afraid not to. Won't you speed the car up? Nancy Drew smiled grimly to herself, despite the awe-inspiring situation with which she had to battle. Which shall it be, Bess? Shall we stop, or shall we try to go faster? Nancy asked the girl beside her in the sporty little roadster. Bess's answer was drowned out by a peal of thunder which followed a blinding flash of lightning. Nancy cast an apprehensive glance at the sky, where black and lead-colored clouds writhed and twisted, although not a sign of a breeze fluttered the tree leaves along the country road up which the automobile was running. "Look how yellow the sky is getting in the southwest!" exclaimed the third occupant of the car, George Fane, who, despite the name, was an attractive girl of about the same age as Nancy and Bess Marvin, her cousin. The three chums had gone for a ride this sultry August afternoon to seek relief from the heat. Some 30 miles from their hometown of River Heights, while traversing an unfamiliar crossroad, they had noticed the suddenly darkened sky. "I guess we are in for it," Nancy cried, as the trees and shrubs bent before a blast of hot wind. A peculiar yellowish tinge spread over the sky, tinting the landscape with a ghostly pallor. Then, without further warning, as if a gigantic bucket had been inverted overhead, the rain poured down in torrents. In a second, the road was obscured, and a few minutes later it became a stream in which the wheels, sending sheets of water fender high, skidded sickeningly. Nancy had slackened the pace of her car to a crawl. The thunder was almost continuous now, making conversation impossible. Bess cowered between her companions, her eyes screwed tightly shut, her fingers to her ears. George, too, was pale and tense when the lightning's glare revealed her face. "Can't we stop under a tree?" she shouted. "Worst place in the world to pick in a thunderstorm," Nancy cried. As if in confirmation of her opinion, a bolt of lightning found its mark in a great, arching elm a few rods ahead. In the almost blinding glare, the girls saw the huge trunk ripped by a splintering furrow from top to bottom, while twigs and branches went hurtling before the wind. "My, but that was close," Nancy exclaimed, blinking her blue eyes. "Too close for comfort. Say, George, isn't that a light ahead?" George peered through the murk. "It's a house, I'm sure," she cried. "Stop a minute. Here's a signboard. It says, 'Luncheons and dinners served at the Sign of the Twisted Candles, 50 feet ahead.' Good! We'll find shelter until the storm blows over," Nancy called out, turning into a driveway which came into view. As she shifted into second gear, the motor sputtered warningly. The car lurched, and a sheet of muddy water deluged the windshield as the front wheels sank more than hub-deep into the rain-gouged gutter of the dirt road. With a last cough, the engine stopped. "Oh, pshaw!" Nancy exclaimed in vexation. "I guess the distributor got wet. We're stuck!" Bess opened her eyes warily and took her fingers from her ears. "Why did you stop here?" she demanded. "I didn't stop. I was stopped," Nancy answered ruefully. "I guess we'll have to run for it. The car is blocking the driveway, but probably no one will be using this road for a while." Gathering their skirts tightly about them, the four girls stepped out onto the running board and jumped over the swirling, foam-flecked current that raced down the side of the road. Bending their heads before the storm, the trio dashed for the tea room, revealed now as a rambling building of the Civil War period, its central structure a flat-roofed, 3-story tower flanked by long 1.5-story wings. There was a dim glow of light from the ground floor windows, and in the arched window at the top of the tower, a sturdy candlelight gleamed welcomingly. Laughing, gasping, and almost breathless, Nancy and her chums scampered up the broad front steps of the place and onto the wide porch. An array of tables and chairs had evidently been hastily pushed against the walls. I'm sure I look a fright, Bess panted. None of us looks especially like a page from a fashion magazine, Nancy laughed, running her slim fingers through her wavy blonde hair. Who would expect us to, when we've just barely escaped from drowning? Nancy led the way to the door and opened it without ceremony. The 3 girls found themselves in a long hall, lighted by curiously twisted candles in sconces on the walls. To the left and to the right, arched doorways opened into high-ceilinged rooms where tables, each with a candle fluttering in the draught, were set in rows. 6 couples looked up curiously as the girls entered, and then resumed their contemplation of food or storm. From a doorway in the rear of the hall, a woman, clad in black and wearing a small, frilled white apron, approached Nancy and her friends. "Good afternoon," Nancy said. "Our car is stalled in your driveway. We should like to have some tea and cinnamon toast and stay here until the storm is over." The woman, revealed now as a gaunt, thin-lipped person past middle age, nodded her head. "Just take any table," she replied. "Is there a dressing room where we could freshen up a bit?" Nancy next asked. "This is also a hotel, but at present no rooms are taken," the housekeeper said. "Just go into any chamber. There is running water and a dresser with mirror in each." Nancy thanked the woman and led the way up the old staircase to the upper hall. She opened the door of the first room she came to. The girls found themselves in a plainly furnished bedroom and proceeded to rearrange their damp and wrinkled clothing and to straighten their hair. They worked wordlessly and at top speed, eager to be downstairs where there were other persons, for the storm still raged furiously, while the appalling thunder and the blinding blue flare of the lightning made even Nancy feel ill at ease. Just as they were completing their toilettes, the girls heard an angry masculine voice outside the door. "Where do you think you're going with that?" Nancy, always alert to anything savoring of a mystery, turned to her chums with her fingers on her lips. A girl's voice replied, but Nancy had difficulty in hearing what was said, as the storm was so ear-filling. "He is 100 today, so I thought you wouldn't mind," was all that could be heard. "That's what he says. Let him eat his mush and milk," shouted the man. "Take that tray back. There are 3 young ladies just in to be fed. Get downstairs and help." "But on his 100th birthday," the girl's voice came to their ears. "No back talk. That's $2 worth of food there. Keep out of the tower." The sentence was cut short by an ear-splitting crash, followed by the tinkle of falling glass. The girls were blinded for a moment by the glare of the lightning bolt, which had just shivered an ancient pine tree just outside the house, toppling the hoary evergreen against the building to the destruction of several windows. The shock of the bolt sent Nancy and her chums reeling against the foot of the bed. After the thunder had died away, there followed a death-like stillness. The rain halted abruptly, and from the floor below could be heard the scraping of chairs hurriedly pushed back, together with exclamations of surprise and fright from the guests. Feet thundered on the stairs as the man who had berated the girl outside the door dashed down to ascertain what damage had been done and to calm the people. Then the door of the room in which the three girls were waiting creaked on its hinges and slowly opened inward. Nancy watched it with fascination. Hesitatingly, the slender figure of a girl of about 16 came into view. She seemed to be dazed and frightened, but whether from fear of the man or of the stroke of lightning, Nancy could not guess. Like the woman who had greeted them, the girl was clad in a black dress and a white apron. Clenched in her hands was a tray held stiffly before her. A bouquet of flowers and several dishes of tempting-looking food were in imminent danger of sliding from it to the floor. "Here, let me take that," Nancy cried, leaping forward. "Oh, who?" The girl gave a faint scream and swayed on her feet. Nancy seized the tray and with one motion thrust it into the hands of the amazed Bess. "We were just in here straightening ourselves out after being caught in the rain," Nancy explained as she put a capable arm about the girl's quivering form. Regarding the frightened young woman with pity, Nancy led her to the bed and gently pushed her into a sitting position. "Just rest a minute," she urged. "I think a tree was struck right outside. The danger is past." The girl sank down obediently, then suddenly leaped to her feet. "Oh, what am I thinking of?" she cried. I must go. The twisted candles." End of chapter 1.